What if everything we think we know about time is wrong? From military experiments gone terribly wrong to ordinary people who claim they've seen humanity's distant future, these 15 cases will challenge everything you believe about the nature of reality itself. Do you believe that time travel is possible? What if we told you right now that there are people walking among us who claim they've actually done it? People who say they've seen the year 3906, visited parallel dimensions, or witnessed civilizations thousands of years in our future. If you're thinking that time travel only exists in movies and that everything must have a logical explanation, then we're really curious to hear how you'll explain these 15 disturbing cases. Some involve government experiments that were never supposed to see the light of day. Others involve ordinary people who experienced something so bizarre that their lives were never the same. And a few involve artifacts and evidence that simply shouldn't exist. So, let's jump straight into the first one, and this one is on a whole different level. Imagine you're piloting a plane through a violent storm when suddenly the weather clears, and below you appears an airfield that shouldn't exist yet. An airfield from the future. This is exactly what happened to a highly respected Royal Air Force officer in 1935, and his testimony has never been explained. Air Marshal Sir Victor Goddard was a decorated military pilot whose credibility was beyond question, which makes what happened to him that day all the more disturbing. He was flying a small biplane over Scotland when he encountered a storm so severe it nearly brought his aircraft down. Fighting to maintain control, he descended through the clouds near an abandoned airfield called Drem, a place he knew well because it had been decommissioned years earlier and left to decay. But when he broke through the cloud layer, what he saw made absolutely no sense. The airfield below him was completely restored. It was bustling with activity. Mechanics in blue overalls were working on aircraft. Planes were lined up in perfect formation. And these weren't just any planes. They were yellow training aircraft of a type Goddard had never seen before. The Royal Air Force didn't use yellow training planes in 1935. The weather was also completely different. While moments before he had been fighting through a violent storm, the airfield below was bathed in bright sunshine. Goddard circled the area several times, taking in every detail. And then the storm seemed to swallow him up again. When he emerged on the other side, the airfield was once again abandoned and decaying, exactly as he remembered it. For years, Goddard said nothing about what he had witnessed, afraid people would think he had lost his mind. But then something remarkable happened. In 1939, 4 years after his strange experience, the Royal Air Force reopened Drem Airfield. It was restored exactly as Goddard had seen it in his vision. Mechanics began wearing blue overalls instead of the traditional brown, and most shocking of all, the RAF introduced yellow training aircraft for the first time. Every detail matched what Goddard had witnessed that day in 1935. He had somehow seen the airfield not as it was, but as it would be 4 years in the future. So, what really happened during those few minutes when Goddard descended through the clouds? Some researchers believe he flew through a time slip, a temporary crack in the fabric of time where past, present, and future can briefly overlap. According to this theory, certain atmospheric conditions, particularly during severe storms, might create pockets where the normal flow of time becomes distorted. Others suggest that the intense electromagnetic activity in the storm could have triggered some kind of temporal window, allowing Goddard to witness a scene from the future. Skeptics, of course, have their own explanations. Some argue that Goddard might have experienced a vivid hallucination caused by stress and lack of oxygen during his fight with the storm. Others suggest his memory was influenced by later events, that he unconsciously incorporated details from 1939 into his recollection of 1935. But these explanations struggle to account for the remarkable accuracy of what Goddard described, details he couldn't possibly have predicted or imagined. Sir Victor Goddard went on to have a distinguished career in the Royal Air Force, eventually becoming an Air Marshal. He never wavered in his account of what happened that day over Scotland. So, did this decorated officer truly glimpse the future during a storm? Or is there a rational explanation that we haven't discovered yet? The mystery remains unsolved to this day. In the summer of 1901, 2 highly educated English women took a vacation to Paris that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Charlotte Ann Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain were respected academics, principals of St. Hugh's College at Oxford University. They were not the type of people prone to flights of fancy or supernatural beliefs, Yet on August 10, 1901, while visiting the Palace of Versailles, they claim they walked straight into the year 1789 and witnessed Marie Antoinette herself. What makes this case so disturbing is that both women independently drew maps, wrote detailed accounts, and spent years researching historical records that seemed to confirm impossible details they couldn't have known. The day started ordinarily enough. The two women decided to visit the Petit Trianon, Marie Antoinette's private retreat on the grounds of Versailles. As they walked through the gardens, both women began to feel an overwhelming sense of oppression and unease. The atmosphere changed. Everything felt dreamlike and strange. Then they began encountering people dressed in clothing from the late 18th century. At first, they assumed these were groundskeepers or perhaps actors in period costume, but something about these figures felt wrong. They moved strangely. Their faces seemed flat and unreal, almost like they were two-dimensional. They saw two men in green coats and three-cornered hats who gave them confusing directions. They encountered a man with a pockmarked face sitting near a kiosk who filled them with inexplicable dread. As they approached the Petit Trianon itself, Moberly saw a woman sitting on the lawn sketching. She was wearing an elaborate light-colored dress and a large white hat. The woman turned and looked directly at Moberly, and in that moment, Moberly was convinced she was looking at Marie Antoinette herself. Then, as suddenly as the experience began, everything returned to normal. The strange figures vanished. The oppressive atmosphere lifted. Modern tourists reappeared around them. When the two women compared notes days later, they were shocked to discover they had both experienced the same inexplicable events, though with some variations in what each had witnessed. They spent the next 10 years researching the history of Versailles in meticulous detail. What they discovered was deeply unsettling. The people they had seen matched descriptions of actual individuals who had been present at Versailles in 1789. The man with the pockmarked face matched descriptions of the Comte de Vaudreuil. The layout of the gardens they experienced matched historical maps from 1789, not the current layout of 1901. Buildings they had seen no longer existed in their time, but were confirmed through historical records to have stood in that exact location in the 18th century. So, what happened to these two distinguished academics on that August afternoon? Researchers have proposed that Versailles, with its intense historical significance and emotional resonance, might be a location where the boundaries between different time periods become thin. Some believe the women experienced a retrocognitive vision, where they were able to perceive events from the past as if they were happening in the present. Others suggest they may have walked through a time slip similar to Victor Goddard's experience. Skeptics argue that the women may have encountered real people in period costume, perhaps actors rehearsing for a historical production, and their minds filled in the rest. They suggest the research came after the experience, and the women unconsciously shaped their memories to fit historical facts they later discovered. But this explanation struggles to account for the architectural details and landscape features the women described that no longer existed in 1901, and that they could not have known about without extensive historical research. The two women published their account in 1911 under the title An Adventure, using pseudonyms to protect their academic reputations. The book caused a sensation and remains one of the most debated cases of alleged time travel to this day. Did Charlotte Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain truly step back in time to the final days before the French Revolution? The answer remains as mysterious as it was over a century ago. In the year 2000, someone calling themselves John Titor began posting on internet forums claiming to be a soldier from the year 2036. He said he had been sent back in time on a military mission to retrieve a specific piece of 1970s computer technology. At first, it seemed like just another internet hoax, another person looking for attention in the early days of online forums. But then people started checking his claims, and things got weird. Really weird. Titor's mission, he claimed, was to find an IBM 5100 computer because it contained hidden functions that would be crucial for preventing a future computer catastrophe. Here's where it gets disturbing. An engineer who worked on the IBM 5100 later confirmed that the computer did indeed have secret debugging features that were never publicly documented. Features that John Titor couldn't have known about unless he had inside information, or unless he was telling the truth. Titor's posts appeared on forums between November 2000 and March 2001. He engaged in detailed conversations about the mechanics of time travel, describing his device as a military-grade portable unit, weighing about 500 pounds and capable of traveling at roughly 10 years per hour. He even posted technical diagrams of the device, explaining how it used rotating singularities to bend space-time. But what captured people's attention weren't just his technical explanations. It was his predictions about the future and his knowledge of the past that shouldn't have been possible. He described a future where a second American Civil War begins in 2004, escalating into a full nuclear exchange by 2015. He talked about mad cow disease becoming a major crisis, which seemed absurd in 2000, but became headline news just months after his posts ended. He mentioned that CERN would discover the basis for time travel in 2001. And interestingly, CERN did announce unexpected findings that year. He warned about the dangers of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, the human form of mad cow disease, becoming widespread. And most remarkably, he spoke in detail about the Y2K-style computer problems that would plague legacy systems, which is why he needed the IBM 5100. When Bob Dubke, a former IBM engineer, was asked about Titer's claims regarding the IBM 5100, he confirmed something that had been kept quiet for decades. The computer did indeed have an undocumented feature that allowed it to emulate and debug mainframe systems, translating between different computer languages. This function was never advertised and was known only to a handful of engineers who worked on the project. How could John Titor have known this? Titor also posted photographs allegedly showing his time machine, a device installed in a 1987 Chevrolet Suburban, along with a manual that appeared to be from a future military organization. He described meeting his parents as young adults and visiting himself as a toddler. He talked about temporal physics with a level of detail that impressed actual physicists, even if they disagreed with his conclusions. So, who was John Titor? Researchers and internet detectives have spent over 2 decades trying to answer that question. Some believe he was a hoaxer with insider knowledge of IBM systems. Others think he might have been a collaborative writing project or an early form of viral marketing. But the believers point to the impossibility of him knowing about the IBM 5100's hidden features, and they note that some of his predictions, while not perfectly accurate, were eerily close to actual events. Skeptics argue that Titor's failed predictions prove he was a fraud. His civil war never materialized. His nuclear exchange didn't happen. But supporters counter that Titor himself explained that time travel to the past creates divergent world lines, parallel timelines where events unfold differently. According to this interpretation, his presence in the year 2000 may have altered our timeline, preventing the catastrophic future he came from. Before we continue, here's a quick question for you. If you could travel to any point in time for one full day, which year would you choose? Just write the year down in the comments below. We're really excited to see your answers. If you're enjoying this video, we'd really appreciate a like and a subscription. Thank you so much. Deep within the Vatican's most restricted archives, there allegedly exists a device so powerful and so terrifying that only a handful of people have ever been allowed to see it. A machine that can look backward and forward through time itself. The chronovisor, as it was called, was supposedly invented by Father Pellegrino Ernetti, a respected Italian priest, scientist, and exorcist in the 1950s. But this wasn't just some priest making wild claims. Father Ernetti taught at the Benedictine Abbey and had worked with some of the greatest scientific minds of his era, including Nobel Prize winner Enrico Fermi. According to Ernetti, the chronovisor could capture electromagnetic radiation that has been echoing through space since the beginning of time and reconstruct historical events in visual form. Father Ernetti first revealed the existence of the chronovisor in a 1972 interview with an Italian magazine. He claimed that he and a team of 12 scientists, including Enrico Fermi and Wernher von Braun, had successfully built the device in the late 1950s. The machine allegedly worked on the principle that every action, every event, every moment in history leaves behind electromagnetic traces that continue propagating through space. The chronovisor could detect these traces, decode them, and display them as images on a screen, essentially allowing the viewer to watch history unfold like a movie. But Ernetti didn't just talk about the theory. He claimed to have used the device extensively. He said he had witnessed the crucifixion of Jesus Christ and provided a detailed description of the event. He claimed to have watched Napoleon's final days and observed the eruption that destroyed Pompeii. Most dramatically, in 1972, he published what he said was a photograph taken with the chronovisor showing the face of Jesus during the crucifixion. He also claimed to have viewed and transcribed a lost play by the Roman playwright Thyestes, a work that had been missing for nearly 2,000 years. The implications of such a device are staggering and deeply disturbing. If the chronovisor truly worked, it would mean that privacy itself becomes impossible. Every moment of human history, every secret, every crime, every private conversation would be visible to whoever controlled the machine. According to Ernetti, this is precisely why the Vatican confiscated the device and ordered all research stopped. He claimed that Pope Pius X himself, after seeing demonstrations of the chronovisor's capabilities, declared it too dangerous for humanity and ordered it locked away in the Vatican's secret archives. Skeptics have had a field day with this story. The photograph of Jesus that Ernetti published was later shown to be nearly identical to a common religious statue. Linguists analyzed the text of the supposedly lost Roman play and declared it an obvious modern fake. Critics pointed out that Ernetti provided no technical specifications, no proof that the device ever existed, and no way to verify any of his claims. Yet, supporters of the chronovisor story note that Ernetti never recanted, even on his deathbed in 1994. Father François Brune, a French priest and friend of Ernetti, claimed that shortly before his death, Ernetti confessed that while some of the evidence he had published was fabricated to protect the real device, the chronovisor itself was genuine and still existed somewhere within the Vatican. He allegedly told Brune that he had been forced to muddy the waters with fake evidence to prevent the device from falling into the wrong hands. Researchers have also pointed out that the scientific team Ernetti claimed to have worked with included some of the most brilliant minds of the 20th century, men who would not have wasted their time on a fool's errand. Could these giants of physics really have believed they could build a time-viewing device? Or was Ernetti exploiting their names to lend credibility to an elaborate hoax? So, does a machine capable of viewing any moment in history truly exist in the Vatican's secret archives? Can we really capture and decode the electromagnetic echoes of the past? The Vatican has never officially commented on the chronovisor's existence, which only deepens the mystery. What secrets might be hidden in those restricted archives? And what would it mean for humanity if we could truly see everything that has ever happened? What if the United States government has been conducting time travel experiments since the 1960s? What if they've been sending children through time as part of a secret program that most people couldn't even imagine? According to lawyer Andrew Basiago, this isn't science fiction, it's his childhood. Basiago claims that as a young boy in the late 1960s and early 1970s, he was recruited into a classified DARPA program called Project Pegasus. The goal of this program, he says, was to test experimental time travel and teleportation technologies. But what makes his testimony particularly disturbing is the level of detail he provides and the fact that other alleged participants have come forward with similar stories. Basiago claims that his father, Raymond Basiago, worked as a CIA officer and volunteered his son for the program when Andrew was just 7 years old. The project allegedly involved multiple methods of time travel and teleportation. One device, which Basiago calls the Jump Room, used Tesla-based quantum access technology to teleport individuals to distant locations, including allegedly to Mars. But the most disturbing aspect of his testimony involves what he calls temporal displacement experiments, using chronovisors and plasma-based time travel devices. According to Basiago, one of the methods involved stepping through a plasma field that would tear a hole in space-time, sending the subject forward or backward in time. He claims to have made multiple trips to the past, including to Ford's Theater on the night Abraham Lincoln was assassinated and to Gettysburg during the famous address. He even claims there is a photograph from 1863 showing him as a child at Gettysburg, a photograph that he says proves his testimony. He describes the experience of time travel as terrifying and disorienting, comparing it to being torn apart and reassembled. But Basiago's claims go even further. He alleges that Project Pegasus was used to identify future political leaders by viewing timelines ahead, He claims he was shown evidence that he himself would run for president, and that Barack Obama, whom he says he met as a teenager in the program, was identified as a future president decades before his election. He even claims that Donald Trump's presidency was known to the program long before it happened. Other individuals have come forward claiming to have been part of similar programs. William Stillings and Bernard Mendez both claim to have participated in the jump room experiments and to have traveled to Mars alongside Basiago. Brett Stillings claims he attended meetings on Mars with Barack Obama in the early 1980s. Laura Magdalene Eisenhower, the great-granddaughter of President Dwight Eisenhower, claims she was recruited for a secret Mars colony project, but managed to escape before being sent. Skeptics point out that Basiago has provided no physical evidence for his claims, no documents, no artifacts from his alleged time travels, nothing that could be independently verified. The photograph he claims shows him at Gettysburg is of extremely poor quality and could show anyone or no one. Critics note that his stories seem to incorporate elements from science fiction movies and books, and that his claims about identifying future presidents sound more like fantasy than reality. Yet, Basiago maintains his testimony with absolute consistency. He has appeared at numerous conferences, written extensively about his experiences, and even run for political office on a platform that includes full disclosure of time travel technologies. He claims that the reason he's come forward is because he believes the American people have a right to know that time travel exists and has been operational for decades. Some researchers note that DARPA has indeed conducted numerous classified projects over the decades, and that the agency has a history of pursuing technologies that sound like science fiction. Tesla's name has been associated with numerous conspiracy theories about secret government projects. Could there be any truth to Basiago's claims, or is this an elaborate delusion or calculated deception? The mystery deepens when we consider that several of his fellow alleged participants tell remarkably similar stories, with matching details they couldn't have coordinated. Are they all part of an elaborate hoax? Are they sharing a collective delusion? Or could there be something more to these testimonies? The question remains unanswered, and Andrew Basiago continues to insist that everything he has described is absolutely true. At the very eastern tip of Long Island, New York, there sits an abandoned military base that locals claim was the site of some of the most disturbing experiments ever conducted on American soil. Camp Hero in Montauk became the center of conspiracy theories so elaborate and so detailed that many researchers believe there has to be some truth buried beneath the legends. The Montauk Project, as it came to be known, allegedly involved experiments in time travel, mind control, and contact with extraterrestrial beings. But the most terrifying piece of equipment supposedly developed there was something called the Montauk Chair. According to whistleblowers who claim to have worked at the facility, the Montauk Project began in the early 1970s as an extension of the Philadelphia experiment. The alleged goal was to develop psychological warfare techniques, but it quickly evolved into something far more sinister. The Montauk Chair was supposedly designed to amplify the psychic abilities of gifted individuals, allowing them to manipulate reality itself. A person would sit in the chair while technicians amplified their thoughts using exotic technology. Whatever the person visualized would allegedly materialize in a physical form somewhere in the facility. But the experiments didn't stop there. According to Preston Nichols, who claims to have been the technical director of the project, they discovered that the chair could be used to open portals through time. Nichols alleges that by focusing the thoughts of psychically gifted children, they could create stable wormholes to different time periods. He claims that people and objects were sent through these portals to various points in history, and that beings from other times and dimensions sometimes came through in the opposite direction. The most disturbing testimony comes from Al Bielek and Duncan Cameron, who both claim to have been participants in the experiments. They describe horrific scenarios where children were kidnapped off the streets of New York and brought to Montauk to be tested for psychic abilities. Those who showed promise were allegedly subjected to intense trauma-based mind control to enhance their powers. Cameron claims he was one of the primary psychics used in the chair, and that his visualizations created portals that connected different time periods, including a link to the year 6037. The stories grow even stranger. Some witnesses claim that a portal was accidentally opened to the year 1943, creating a connection between the Montauk Project and the Philadelphia Experiment, linking the two projects across 40 years. Others describe encounters with alien entities, the creation of monsters from pure thought, and experiments that left participants mentally shattered. So what really happened at Montauk? Skeptics point out that the base was indeed a military installation, but it was officially decommissioned in 1981. They note that no physical evidence of exotic technology has ever been found, and that the stories seem to blend elements from science fiction with Cold War paranoia. Critics also highlight inconsistencies in the testimonies of alleged participants. Yet, supporters point to the fact that multiple witnesses, many who didn't know each other, have come forward with remarkably similar accounts. They note that Camp Hero had an enormous radar dish and underground facilities that remain sealed to this day. The area around Montauk has long been associated with strange electromagnetic phenomena and reports of time distortions. The abandoned base still stands today, slowly decaying behind chain-link fences. Local residents report strange lights, unusual sounds, and feelings of disorientation near the facility. Some claim that time still behaves strangely in certain areas around Camp Hero. Did the United States government truly conduct time travel experiments at Montauk? Or is this an elaborate myth that has taken on a life of its own? The truth remains buried somewhere beneath Long Island. In the remote Swiss countryside, a one-armed farmer named Edward Albert Billy Meyer claims he has been in contact with extraterrestrial beings from the Pleiades star cluster since 1942. But this isn't a typical alien contact story. According to Meyer, these beings, called the Plejaren, have shown him visions of Earth's future, taken him through time, and given him specific predictions about events that would unfold decades later. What makes this case deeply unsettling is that some of his predictions, made in the 1970s and 1980s, allegedly came true with disturbing accuracy. Meyer's contact began when he was just 5 years old, or so he claims. The beings he encountered told him they were time travelers from Earth's distant future who had evolved beyond our current human form. According to Meyer, they exist slightly out of phase with our timeline, which is why most people cannot see them or their spacecraft. Over the decades, Meyer accumulated thousands of pages of contact notes, hundreds of photographs of alleged spacecraft, and even metal samples he claims came from Plejaren ships. But what captured the attention of researchers weren't the photographs or physical evidence. It was the predictions. In 1975, Meyer predicted the discovery of new moons around Jupiter and Saturn, which were confirmed years later. He described the rings of Saturn in specific detail before NASA's Voyager missions sent back images confirming his descriptions. He warned of the Chernobyl disaster years before it happened, describing a nuclear catastrophe in the Soviet Union with disturbing accuracy. In the late 1970s, Meyer predicted that the Soviet Union would collapse and that Germany would reunify. At the time, such predictions seemed absurd. The Cold War was at its height, and few believed the Soviet Union would ever fall. Yet everything Meyer described came to pass. He also predicted major earthquakes, including a devastating quake that would hit San Francisco, and warned about the rise of Islamic terrorism decades before it became a global concern. Most remarkably, Meyer published warnings about climate change and environmental catastrophe in the 1970s, describing rising sea levels, extreme weather events, and global warming with a level of detail that seemed impossible for a Swiss farmer with limited education. The Plejaren allegedly showed him visions of Earth's future, images of flooded cities, devastating storms, and environmental collapse that we're now witnessing in our present day. Skeptics have attacked Meyer's case relentlessly. Investigators discovered that some of his famous UFO photographs appear to show models suspended on strings. Analysis of his metal samples revealed they were common terrestrial alloys. Critics point out that many of his predictions were vague enough to fit multiple outcomes, and that his failed predictions are conveniently forgotten by his supporters. Yet the case refuses to die. Some of his photographs have been analyzed by experts who cannot explain how they were faked using 1970s technology. Witnesses claim to have seen the craft Meyer photographed, and the accuracy of some of his specific predictions continues to puzzle researchers. How could a one-armed farmer with an 8th grade education predict scientific discoveries that wouldn't be made for years? Meyer maintains that the Plejaren showed him these future events by literally taking him forward in time, allowing him to witness what would come to pass. He claims they did this because they want humanity to change. Of course, to avoid the catastrophic timeline they've seen. According to Meyer, we still have time to alter our future, but the window is closing. So, is Billy Meier truly in contact with time-traveling beings from our own future? Are his predictions evidence of genuine foreknowledge, or clever guesswork and retrofitting? The debate has raged for nearly 50 years, and no one has been able to definitively prove or disprove his claims. What do you think? Could a simple farmer really have access to knowledge of humanity's future? This case appears in our reference material and remains one of the most detailed accounts of future civilization ever recorded. A Swiss teacher named Paul Amadeus Dienach fell into a coma in 1921 due to a rare illness and claimed his consciousness traveled to the year 3906, where it inhabited the body of a man living in that distant future. Unlike other time travel stories, Dienach's account is remarkable because he wrote extensively about what he experienced, publishing his observations in a book called Chronicles from the Future. He described a world where humanity had overcome war, disease, and conflict, where lifespans extended to 200 years, and where a great spiritual awakening had transformed human consciousness itself. Dienach was suffering from encephalitis lethargica, a mysterious disease that caused him to fall into a deep coma that lasted nearly a year. During this time, his body lay motionless in a hospital bed in Geneva, but his consciousness, he claimed, traveled nearly 2,000 years into the future. What makes his experience different from typical near-death experiences or fever dreams is the extraordinary level of detail and internal consistency in his account. He didn't just see glimpses or visions. He lived an entire life in the future, inhabiting the body of a man named Andreas Northam. According to Dienach's writings, the people of 3906 initially didn't realize his consciousness had come from the past. They believed Andreas Northam had suffered a head injury that caused amnesia. But as Dienach began to understand the world around him, and as his knowledge of 20th century history became apparent, the people of the future realized they were dealing with something extraordinary. They made the decision to educate him about their world, to show him how humanity had evolved over the centuries. Dienach described in meticulous detail how humanity had survived several global catastrophes between our time and his destination in the future. He wrote about a devastating war in the 21st century that nearly destroyed civilization. He described how humanity eventually abolished money, governments, and national borders, creating a unified global society focused on personal and spiritual development. Advanced technology had eliminated scarcity and suffering. Death was no longer feared, but accepted as a natural transition. But the most fascinating aspect of his account was his description of what he called the Great Revolution, or the etherocentric shift that occurred around the year 3400. According to Dienach, humanity underwent a spontaneous evolutionary leap in consciousness. People suddenly gained access to what he called higher faculties, abilities to perceive and interact with reality in ways we can't currently imagine. This transformation marked the true beginning of humanity's golden age. Dienach filled his journals with detailed descriptions of daily life in the year 3906, the architecture, the social structures, the educational systems, and most importantly, the philosophical and spiritual understanding that guided this future civilization. He described how people no longer worked for survival, but pursued knowledge and self-actualization as their primary goals. He wrote about their understanding of time itself, how they viewed past, present, and future as simultaneously existing realities. When Dienach finally awoke from his coma in 1922, he found himself back in his failing body in 20th century Geneva. He was devastated. He had spent what felt like years in a paradise, and now he was back in a world of suffering, conflict, and limitation. He spent the remaining years of his life frantically writing down everything he could remember, fearing his memories would fade. Skeptics argue that Dienach's experience was simply an elaborate fever dream, a hallucination created by his diseased brain during his coma. They point out that much of what he described reflects the hopes and fears of someone living in the aftermath of World War I, a person longing for a better future. Critics note that he provided no verifiable predictions about the near future that could prove his experience was genuine. Yet supporters of Dienach's account Note the extraordinary sophistication of his vision. This was not a simplistic utopia, but a complex civilization with its own problems and challenges. The philosophical depth of his writings suggests something more than mere fantasy. And some researchers have pointed to elements in his account that seem to predict developments in quantum physics and consciousness research that Dionne couldn't have known about in 1921. Before we continue, what do you think happens to our consciousness when we're in a coma? Could our minds truly travel through time while our bodies remain motionless? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're enjoying these cases, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much. In 1943, the United States Navy allegedly conducted an experiment so classified and so dangerous that it accidentally tore holes in the fabric of time itself. The Philadelphia experiment, as it came to be known, supposedly involved an attempt to make the USS Eldridge destroyer invisible to radar using powerful electromagnetic fields. But according to Al Bielek, who claims to have been aboard that ship, something went catastrophically wrong. The ship didn't just become invisible. It vanished completely and reappeared hundreds of miles away before returning. Some crew members were found fused into the metal walls of the ship. Others went insane. And a few, including Bielek, claimed they were thrown forward in time to the year 2137 and then brought back. Al Bielek's story is one of the most elaborate and disturbing testimonies in the entire field of alleged time travel. According to Bielek, whose real name was allegedly Edward Cameron, he was a crew member aboard the USS Eldridge on October 28, 1943, when the Navy tested a technology based on Einstein's unified field theory. The goal was to bend light around the ship, making it invisible to enemy radar, and possibly even to the human eye. Tesla technology and massive electromagnetic generators were supposedly installed aboard the ship. When the generators were activated, Bielek claims the ship began to glow with an eerie green light. Then everything went wrong. The ship didn't just become invisible, it completely dematerialized from the Philadelphia Naval Yard and rematerialized at Norfolk, Virginia, over 200 miles away. Crew members reported seeing strange tunnels of light, experiencing severe disorientation, and feeling as if they were being torn apart at the molecular level. When the ship returned to Philadelphia moments later, the scene was one of absolute horror. According to Bielek, many crew members were dead. Some had been fused into the metal structure of the ship itself. Their bodies merged with steel bulkheads and deck plating. Others had gone completely insane, screaming about things they had seen in the space between moments. A few crew members had become stuck in what Bielek describes as a state of phase shifting, flickering in and out of visibility and tangibility. These men would suddenly become invisible or walk through solid objects before snapping back into normal reality. But Bielek's testimony grows even more incredible. He claims that he and his brother, Duncan Cameron, jumped off the ship during the experiment to escape the chaos. Instead of hitting the water in 1943, they landed in the year 2137 at the Montauk facility, creating a direct connection between the Philadelphia experiment and the Montauk project. According to Bielek, he spent time in 2137, saw the future of humanity, and was then sent back to 1943 with his memories suppressed. Bielek describes the year 2137 as a world devastated by nuclear war and environmental collapse. Humanity had survived, but was struggling to rebuild. The people of that future had developed limited time travel technology, which is how they were able to rescue him and his brother from the temporal vortex created by the Philadelphia experiment. He claims they showed him records of the experiment and explained how it had created instabilities in the timeline that were causing problems throughout multiple eras. Eventually, Bielek says he was age-regressed and given a new identity, living the first part of his life with false memories until his real memories began to resurface in the 1980s. He spent decades trying to piece together what had happened to him and eventually went public with his story. Skeptics have thoroughly demolished Bielek's claims. Naval records show that the USS Eldridge was not in Philadelphia on the date in question, and that the ship's logs contain no mention of any unusual experiments. Researchers have found no evidence that Einstein's unified field theory could be used in the way Bielek describes. Critics point out that Bielek's story conveniently incorporates elements from a 1955 science fiction novel and changed significantly over the years. Yet the Philadelphia experiment legend persists, and Bielek's testimony, however questionable, remains the most detailed first-hand account. Some researchers note that classified military projects often leave no paper trail, and that the Navy has a history of conducting secret experiments. Others point to the fact that several people have come forward with similar stories about the Philadelphia experiment, all describing the same basic event. Did the United States Navy accidentally create a time portal in 1943? Did Al Bielek truly travel to the year 2137? Or is this an elaborate hoax built on a foundation of earlier legends and science fiction? The mystery remains as impenetrable as the electromagnetic fields that allegedly surrounded the USS Eldridge that October day. In 2006, a Swedish man named Håkan Nordqvist was doing routine plumbing work in his kitchen when something impossible happened. He reached under the sink to fix a leak, and when he pulled his arm back out, he wasn't in his kitchen anymore. He wasn't even in 2006 anymore. According to Nordqvist, he suddenly found himself in the year 2042, standing in what appeared to be a futuristic version of his own home. But the most disturbing part wasn't the time travel itself. It was who he met there, a 70-year-old man who looked exactly like him, his future self. The old man claimed to be Håkan Nordqvist from 2042, and he had been waiting for this moment because he remembered it happening when he was younger. Nordqvist's story emerged in the Swedish media in 2006 and quickly spread across the internet. According to his account, he was alone in his apartment in Västerås, Sweden, attempting to fix a leaking pipe under his kitchen sink. As he reached his hand into the dark space beneath the pipes, he felt something strange, a tingling sensation and a pull, as if the space under the sink was somehow larger than it should be. When he pulled his arm back, his entire body was suddenly pulled through. He found himself standing in what he immediately recognized as his own kitchen, but everything was different. The appliances were sleek and unfamiliar. The walls were a different color. Through the window, he could see flying vehicles moving through the air. And then he heard a voice behind him. An old man was sitting at the kitchen table, and the man was smiling as if he'd been expecting him. The old man looked eerily familiar, and then Nordqvist realized with a shock that he was looking at himself, aged by decades. The older Nordqvist explained that the younger man had just traveled through a spontaneous temporal anomaly, a brief tear in space-time that occasionally opens in that specific spot. The older man said he remembered this exact moment from his own past, the day in 2006 when his younger self suddenly appeared in his kitchen from 36 years in the past. He had been waiting for this day, knowing it would come. According to Nordqvist, his older self gave him a quick tour of the year 2042. They didn't go outside, as that would be too risky, but through the windows and on his futuristic screens, he saw glimpses of a world transformed by technology. Climate change had radically altered Sweden's landscape. Technology had advanced in ways that seemed magical. And then his older self gave him something, a small device, possibly a smartphone or something similar, that he said would prove the encounter was real. But then the pull came again. Nordqvist felt the same tingling sensation, and suddenly he was back under his kitchen sink in 2006, sprawled on his kitchen floor, disoriented and shaking. He looked at his hand and saw that he was holding something, the device his future self had given him. But as he examined it, the object began to malfunction and disintegrate, as if it couldn't exist in the wrong time period. Within minutes, it had completely dissolved into nothing, leaving him with no physical proof of his journey. Nordqvist reported the incident to the local media and even filed a police report, though he knew it sounded absurd. He provided drawings of what he had seen and insisted that the experience was absolutely real, not a dream or hallucination. He described specific details about the technology of 2042 and the changes to the world that he had witnessed. Skeptics immediately dismissed the story as a hoax or a delusion. They pointed out that Nordqvist provided no evidence that the object he claimed dissolved would violate basic principles of physics, and that his story contained elements common to science fiction. Some suggested he had experienced a dissociative episode or had dreamed the entire encounter. Yet, Nordqvist never recanted his story. He insisted until his death that what happened was real, that he had truly met his future self. Some researchers have noted that temporal anomalies, if they exist, would most likely be microscopic and brief, but that in rare cases, they might be large enough for a human to pass through. Others have suggested that certain locations might be more prone to such phenomena, due to unique electromagnetic or gravitational conditions. So, did Håkan Nordqvist truly step through time and meet himself as an old man? Or did he experience some kind of vivid hallucination that felt absolutely real? The case remains one of the strangest and most personal accounts of alleged time travel ever reported. What would you do if you suddenly met your future self? And what would your future self tell you about the years to come? A fascinating and deeply unsettling thought. In 2011, a Swedish treasure hunting team using sonar equipment discovered something at the bottom of the Baltic Sea that shouldn't exist. A perfectly circular object, 200 feet in diameter, with what appeared to be a ramp or staircase leading down into it. The formation looked artificial, almost like a crashed spacecraft, sitting in an area where all electronic equipment mysteriously stops working. But what makes this discovery deeply disturbing in the context of time travel are the reports from divers who have gotten close to the anomaly. Some claim their cameras stopped working, others reported their diving equipment malfunctioning, and several divers reported experiencing severe time distortions, where minutes felt like hours, or hours felt like minutes. The discovery was made by the Ocean X team, a group of professional underwater explorers led by Peter Lindberg and Dennis Osberg. They were searching for shipwrecks and valuable cargo when their sonar detected something extraordinary at a depth of about 300 feet. The sonar image showed a massive disc-shaped structure with perfectly geometric features. What appeared to be a 60-foot ramp led up to what looked like an entrance or opening. The team initially thought they had found a sunken Nazi submarine or some kind of World War II anti-submarine device. But when divers descended to examine the object more closely, things got strange. Stefan Hogerborn, one of the lead divers, reported that all of his electrical equipment began malfunctioning as he approached the structure. His underwater camera stopped working. His satellite phone, kept in a waterproof case, completely died. Even the team's sonar equipment aboard the ship stopped functioning when positioned directly above the anomaly. It was as if the object was generating some kind of electromagnetic field that disabled all technology within a certain radius. The divers who managed to get close enough to touch the structure reported something even more disturbing. The surface of the object felt smooth and metallic, covered with what appeared to be manufactured components. Straight lines and perfect angles cut through the rock-like material. And then there were the time distortions. Multiple divers independently reported that their sense of time became completely unreliable near the anomaly. One diver claimed he spent what felt like 30 minutes examining the structure, only to surface and discover that nearly 3 hours had passed. Another reported the opposite, that what should have been an hour-long dive felt like only 10 or 15 minutes. Some divers described feeling a strange pulling sensation, as if the object was exerting some kind of gravitational influence. Others reported severe disorientation, vivid hallucinations, or the sensation of being watched by an unseen presence. Several team members experienced nightmares after diving near the anomaly, dreams of being pulled through swirling tunnels of light into unknown places. So, what is this mysterious object at the bottom of the Baltic Sea? Geologists who have examined samples claim it's simply an unusual natural rock formation, possibly a glacial deposit with an odd but explainable shape. They argue that the electromagnetic interference is caused by natural mineral deposits in the area. The time distortions, they suggest, are simply the result of nitrogen narcosis or other diving-related cognitive impairments. But supporters of the anomaly theory point out that natural formations don't typically have perfectly straight lines, right angles, and what appears to be a constructed staircase. They note that the electromagnetic field is unusually strong and localized, unlike typical geological phenomena. Some researchers have suggested the object might be an ancient structure, perhaps built by a lost civilization that existed before recorded history. Others have proposed something far more extraordinary. Could this be a temporal anchor point? A location where the fabric of space-time has been artificially stabilized or manipulated? Some theorists suggest the object might be a time machine itself, either crashed there from another era or deliberately placed at that location because of unique temporal properties. The time distortions experienced by divers could be evidence of active temporal technology still functioning after who knows how many centuries or millennia. To this day, the Baltic Sea anomaly remains unexplained. The the Swedish government has shown little interest in further investigation. The Ocean X team continues to study the site, but funding and access remain limited. Whatever lies at the bottom of the Baltic Sea, it continues to interfere with electronic equipment and create strange experiences for anyone who ventures too close. Is it ancient technology, a crashed time machine, or simply an unusual rock formation that has captured our imagination? The mystery endures. High in the mountains between China and Tibet, an archaeological expedition in 1938 discovered something that has baffled researchers for decades. A series of caves containing 716 granite discs, each about 9 inches in diameter with a hole in the center, and covered in tiny hieroglyphic symbols spiraling from the center to the edge. When the symbols were finally translated in the 1960s, they told a story that seemed impossible. According to the translation, these stones were created by a group called the Dropa, who crash-landed on Earth approximately 12,000 years ago. But here's what makes this story truly disturbing. The stones allegedly describe these beings not as aliens from another planet, but as refugees from Earth's future who were trying to escape some kind of catastrophe. The discovery was supposedly made by Professor Chi-Pu Tay from Beijing University while leading an archaeological expedition through the Bayankara Ula Mountains. The caves they explored contained unusual features immediately. The walls had been carved with precise geometric patterns. Strange hieroglyphics covered the surfaces. And buried in the dust of centuries were the discs, hundreds of them, each inscribed with minute symbols that spiraled from the center hole to the outer edge, like an ancient phonograph record. But the discs themselves weren't the only mystery. The caves also contained skeletal remains of beings that didn't match any known human population. The skeletons were unusually small, with disproportionately large skulls and delicate bone structures. Some measured barely 4 feet tall. Local legends spoke of the Dropa and the Han, 2 tribes of small, yellow-faced people who came from the sky long ago and still lived in remote parts of the mountains. For decades, the discs remained untranslated mysteries stored in Chinese museums. Then, in 1962, Professor Tsum Nuiyu reportedly succeeded in decoding the symbols. What he translated sent shockwaves through the academic community. According to his interpretation, the discs told the story of the Dropa people who had come to Earth 12,000 years ago when their aircraft crashed in the mountains. The local tribesmen initially attacked the survivors, but eventually, a peaceful relationship was established. Here's where the story takes its most disturbing turn. According to some interpretations of the Dropa texts, these beings weren't extraterrestrials from another planet. They were temporal refugees from Earth's own future. The stones allegedly describe a catastrophe that would devastate human civilization thousands of years from now. The Dropa were survivors who had developed time travel technology and fled backward through time to escape the destruction. They chose to crash land deliberately in remote mountains 12,000 years in our past, hoping to preserve humanity's future by influencing the ancient past. The Dropa stones allegedly contained other remarkable information. They described technologies that wouldn't be developed for millennia. They provided astronomical data about the solar system that ancient people couldn't possibly have known. Some researchers claim the stones even contain warnings about specific future events, encoded messages meant to be discovered at the right moment in history. But here's where the story becomes frustratingly difficult to verify. Most of the original Dropa stones have allegedly disappeared. Chinese authorities claim no such expedition ever took place. Professor Chi-Pu Tay's existence has been called into question. Some researchers claim the entire story was fabricated by Soviet journalist Alexander Kazantsev in the 1960s as Cold War propaganda, or possibly as science fiction, passed off as fact. Yet believers point to photographs that allegedly show some of the stones. They cite reports from visitors who claim to have seen the discs in Chinese museums before they disappeared. Some researchers have noted that the Dropa and Han people do exist in the mountains of China, and that their oral traditions speak of ancestors who came from the stars. Indigenous peoples in the area still tell stories of the sky, people who taught their ancestors agriculture and astronomy. The most intriguing aspect of the Dropa stone story is its unique claim. Unlike most ancient astronaut theories that propose visitors from other worlds, the Dropa legend suggests time travelers from Earth's own future. If true, it would mean that humanity not only survives whatever catastrophe might come, but develops the ability to escape through time itself. Could ancient people 12,000 years ago have encountered refugees from our future? Could those refugees have left behind encoded messages in stone discs, warnings, and knowledge meant to help us avoid the disasters they fled from? Or is this entire story an elaborate modern myth, a cautionary tale dressed up as archaeology? The truth, like the stones themselves, remains frustratingly out of reach. In 1972, two hikers in a remote canyon in New Mexico stumbled upon something that would later become one of the most elaborate and mysterious discoveries in modern times. Hidden deep within the rock face, they found a series of chambers containing artifacts, paintings, and technology that appeared to be thousands of years old, but described events from our future. The artifacts were allegedly left by a group calling themselves the Wingmakers, beings who claimed to be time travelers from approximately 750 years in our future. But these weren't just relics. They were encoded with information about humanity's future evolution, complete with prophecies, warnings, and a detailed account of how human consciousness would transform in the coming centuries. The discovery site, later codenamed Ancient Arrow by government officials, consisted of 23 chambers carved into the canyon wall in an area of New Mexico so remote that it appears on no tourist maps. The chambers were sealed behind what appeared to be solid rock, but careful examination revealed hidden entrances that could only be seen from specific angles at specific times of day when the sunlight hit the rock face in a particular way. Inside, investigators found a treasure trove of inexplicable artifacts. The chambers contained paintings of extraordinary beauty and complexity, depicting scenes that seemed to show humanity's future development. One painting allegedly showed people with enhanced cranial structures, suggesting evolutionary changes to the human brain. Another depicted a spiral timeline connecting past, present, and future, with specific nodes marking important moments in human history. Some of these nodes represented events that had already occurred by 1972. Others pointed to future dates that hadn't arrived yet. But the paintings were just the beginning. The chambers also contained what appeared to be advanced technology disguised as primitive artifacts. Small disc-shaped objects that, when properly activated, allegedly projected holographic images and emitted sounds in unknown languages. Complex optical fibers embedded in stone that shouldn't have been possible with ancient technology. And most remarkably, 23 encoded poetry manuscripts, one in each chamber, written in an unknown language that took researchers years to begin translating. According to the translations, the Wingmakers left these time capsules as part of a coordinated effort to guide humanity through upcoming challenges. They described themselves as future humans who had discovered that consciousness itself can transcend time. The chambers were allegedly one of 7 time capsule sites hidden around the world, each containing specific knowledge meant to be discovered at the right moment in history. The Wingmakers' materials contain detailed philosophical concepts about the nature of time, consciousness, and reality. They described a coming transformation in human awareness that would occur in stages over several centuries. According to the texts, humanity would eventually discover that time is not linear but simultaneous, that past, present, and future all exist in an eternal now, and that consciousness can learn to navigate through this eternal moment. Now we're reaching the final 2 cases, and they might just be the most mind-bending of all. But before we continue, we want to hear from you. Do you think it's possible for humans from our future to travel back to our present? And if you could leave a time capsule for people in the future, what would you put in it? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if these stories are blowing your mind, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more mysterious content. Most researchers dismiss the entire Wingmakers story as an elaborate hoax. They note that the supposed discovery came to public attention in 1998, not immediately after the alleged 1972 discovery. The materials were released through a website by an anonymous source who claimed to have worked on the government project investigating the site. Skeptics point out that no independent verification of the Ancient Arrow site exists. The paintings and artifacts have never been scientifically analyzed. The entire story could be an elaborate piece of interactive fiction. Yet, the Wingmakers' materials demonstrate a level of sophistication and internal consistency that seems extraordinary for a hoax. The philosophical concepts are remarkably deep and original. The artwork, if fabricated, represents hundreds or thousands of hours of skilled labor. The encoded languages follow consistent grammatical rules, and some researchers have noted that certain predictions made in the Wingmakers materials seem to have come true, suggesting either genuine foreknowledge or remarkable lucky guesswork. Supporters of the Wingmakers story believe the time capsules are real and that the information they contain is meant to prepare humanity for upcoming evolutionary changes. They argue that the government has suppressed the discovery because the implications are too revolutionary. If future humans can indeed leave messages for the past, it would overturn everything we think we understand about causality and time. So are the Wingmakers real-time travelers from our future, leaving encoded guidance for humanity? Or is this an elaborate artistic and philosophical project, masquerading as archaeological mystery? The chambers, if they exist, remain sealed and hidden. The truth, like so much in this field, remains tantalizingly out of reach. According to several whistleblowers who claim to have worked in classified government programs, there exists a device so advanced and so disturbing in its implications that access to it is restricted to only the highest levels of military and intelligence agencies. This device, known as the Yellow Book, is allegedly a holographic information storage unit given to the United States government by extraterrestrial beings. But what makes this truly terrifying is what the device reportedly contains: a complete historical record of Earth's past and future, including detailed accounts of events that haven't happened yet. Those who have allegedly viewed the Yellow Book describe it as showing Earth's history from the perspective of beings who exist outside our normal timeline. The Yellow Book first entered public consciousness through the testimonies of several alleged government insiders, including Dan Burish, Bill Hamilton, and others who claim to have worked on classified projects at Area 51 and other secret facilities. According to these whistleblowers, the Yellow Book was given to the U.S. government as part of a technology exchange program with extraterrestrial beings, specifically a species referred to as the Ebens from the Zeta Reticuli star system. But here's what makes the Yellow Book particularly relevant to our discussion of time travel. According to those who claim to have seen it, the device doesn't just show historical records from an alien perspective. It displays events that exist outside of our linear time stream. When activated, the Yellow Book allegedly projects three-dimensional holographic scenes that the viewer can observe from any angle. These scenes show not just what happened in Earth's past, but what will happen in Earth's future, presented as if it has already occurred. Dan Burish, a microbiologist who claims to have worked on classified projects, provided the most detailed description of the Yellow Book. According to Burish, he was given limited access to the device while working at a facility beneath the Papoose Lake site in Nevada. He described it as a small, ancient-looking artifact that, when activated, creates a spherical holographic display around the viewer. The display shows events from Earth's history, but the user can move forward or backward through time as easily as scrolling through a video. Burish claimed that viewing the Yellow Book was a profoundly disturbing experience. He described watching future events unfold, seeing catastrophes and upheavals that haven't happened yet. According to him, the device showed potential timelines, multiple possible futures branching from key decision points. Some timelines showed humanity surviving and eventually joining a galactic community. Other timelines showed catastrophic scenarios where human civilization collapsed. The most unsettling aspect of Burish's testimony is his claim that government officials have been using the Yellow Book to guide policy decisions since at least the 1950s. He alleges that world leaders have been shown specific futures and have made decisions based on what they saw in the Yellow Book, trying to steer humanity toward more favorable timelines while avoiding the catastrophic ones. Other whistleblowers have provided corroborating details. Bill Hamilton described the Yellow Book as containing the entire history of Earth from the perspective of beings who experience time differently than we do. According to Hamilton, the extraterrestrials who gave us the device exist in a state where past, present, and future are all visible simultaneously. To them, our future has already happened. They can observe it as easily as we can observe our past. Some testimonies claim that the Yellow Book shows specific dates for future events, including natural disasters, technological breakthroughs, and political upheavals. Allegedly, some of these predicted events have already come to pass, lending credibility to the device's accuracy. However, the specific nature of these predictions remains classified, known only to those with the highest security clearances. Skeptics, of course, view the entire Yellow Book story as either deliberate disinformation or the delusions of people seeking attention. They point out that none of the whistleblowers have provided physical evidence. No photographs of the Yellow Book exist. No independent verification is possible. The story relies entirely on the testimony of individuals who claim to have worked on classified projects that officially don't exist. Yet the consistency across multiple testimonies is noteworthy. Different witnesses, who claim not to know each other, describe the same basic device with similar capabilities. They all mention the same location, the same approximate time period, and similar experiences of viewing future events. Either they're all part of an elaborate coordinated hoax, or something very strange exists in classified government facilities. If the Yellow Book is real, the implications are staggering. It would mean that the future is not open and undetermined, but already exists in some form, observable to those with the right technology. It would suggest that beings exist who have transcended our linear experience of time. And most disturbingly, it would mean that our leaders have been making decisions based on knowledge of the future that the rest of humanity doesn't have access to. So, does the Yellow Book exist? Is there really a device that can show humanity's future as clearly as we can watch our recorded past? And if it does exist, what have our leaders seen when they've looked into Earth's future? The answers remain locked away in the most classified facilities in the world, if they exist at all. In the Pine Barrens of New Jersey, there allegedly existed a secret research facility that successfully opened a gateway to a parallel Earth. The Ong's Hat experiment, as it came to be known, started in the 1970s as a fringe scientific commune focused on consciousness research and quantum physics. But according to documents that surfaced in the 1990s, the researchers accidentally discovered a method of traveling to alternate dimensions using a device called the Egg. The most disturbing part of this story isn't just that they claim to have succeeded, but what they found on the other side. According to the accounts, the parallel Earth they accessed was similar to ours, but existed several years ahead in time, a place where they could observe what would happen in our future by watching events unfold there first. Ong's Hat is a real location in the New Jersey Pine Barrens, a ghost town that once existed, but now consists of little more than a few ruins and a historical marker. According to the legend that emerged in the 1990s through underground publications and early internet posts, this abandoned area became home to an alternative science commune in the late 1970s. The commune allegedly included renegade physicists, consciousness researchers, and theoretical mathematicians who had been pushed out of mainstream academia for their unconventional ideas. The story goes that these researchers were experimenting with something they called cognitive chaos. By using sensory deprivation, meditation, and exposure to specific electromagnetic frequencies, they claimed to be able to alter human consciousness in profound ways. But their research took an unexpected turn when they began exploring the relationship between consciousness and quantum mechanics. According to documents attributed to a researcher named Wally Fard, the group developed a device they called the Egg. This was a sensory deprivation chamber with a difference. It was allegedly shielded with exotic materials and surrounded by powerful electromagnetic field generators. When a person entered the Egg and achieved certain altered states of consciousness while the electromagnetic fields were active, something extraordinary happened. The person would vanish from our reality and reappear in a parallel dimension. But here's where the story becomes truly fascinating from a time travel perspective. The travelers reported that the parallel Earth they accessed wasn't just a different version of our world. It was our world, or a very similar version of it, but displaced in time. Events that were about to happen in our dimension had already happened there. By traveling to this parallel Earth, they could effectively see several years into our future. The researchers allegedly began making regular trips to the other side, gathering information about future events, technologies, and developments. They claim to have brought back knowledge and artifacts from the parallel Earth. Some accounts suggest they even encountered alternate versions of themselves in the other dimension, people whose lives had followed slightly different paths. The Ong's Hat story spread through underground newsletters, conspiracy theory communities, and the early internet in the 1990s. It included detailed maps, scientific papers, and personal testimonies. The materials described the physics behind the dimensional travel in sophisticated detail, incorporating real quantum mechanical concepts with speculative additions. The story became one of the first major internet-based alternate reality games, blurring the line between fiction and reality. But then things took a dark turn. According to the legend, the government discovered the Ong's Hat facility and shut it down. The researchers scattered. Some supposedly fled to the parallel dimension permanently, choosing to live in exile rather than face government interrogation. Others went into hiding in our world. The facility was allegedly destroyed, leaving no trace of the revolutionary technology that had been developed there. Skeptics have thoroughly investigated the Ong's Hat story and concluded it was an elaborate piece of fiction, possibly one of the first examples of collaborative storytelling on the early internet. Joseph Metheny, a writer and artist, has claimed credit for creating much of the Ong's Hat mythology as an experiment in immersive storytelling. He described it as a mind virus, a story designed to spread through underground culture and challenge people's perceptions of reality. Yet believers point to curious anomalies in the story. Why would someone create such an elaborate hoax with such detailed scientific concepts? Some of the physics described in the Ong's Hat documents anticipated real developments in quantum mechanics that wouldn't be widely discussed for years. Witnesses claim to have visited the actual Ong's Hat location and found strange equipment and unusual electromagnetic readings. Most intriguingly, some researchers note that if the Ong's Hat experiment really did succeed, we would expect exactly what we see. The project would be shut down, the evidence would be destroyed, and the story would be dismissed as fiction. How better to hide a real interdimensional travel experiment than to make it look like an internet hoax? So, what really happened at Ong's Hat? Did a group of fringe scientists truly open a doorway to a parallel Earth where they could observe our future? Or is this one of the most successful pieces of collaborative fiction ever created? A story so compelling that people still argue about its truth decades later. The ruins in the Pine Barrens keep their secrets, and the researchers, real or imagined, have vanished without a trace. Now, we're excited to hear your personal thoughts. Do you believe time travel and interdimensional travel are possible? Or do you think such things are simply beyond reach? Which case fascinated you the most? Which one seemed the most plausible to you? Share your answers in the comments below. And if you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe for more mysterious content, and we'll see you in the next video.